Good evening, everyone. I'm Ashley Banfield. This is Crime and Justice. When criminals are sentenced to life in prison, they don't typically get a parting gift, especially when they're smug and they're cocky and they're downright unlikable. But Kevin Rojas is a different story. This guy was just 19 when he opened fire on an off-duty officer in his car, and those bullets hit their mark. But the officer survived, and it's a good thing, too, because the officer testified all about the man who shot him. And now that man has just had the book thrown at him. Life in prison. And it came with a very provocative present, too, from that cop who he tried to kill. What was that present? Brace yourself and think of prison life. It was a bottle of lube slammed down on the table for effect right there in the courtroom.
So I got a little gift for you. You're gonna need a lot of this where you going.
That officer is again now under fire, this time from victims of sexual assault who say that with that act in that courtroom, he was advocating rape. Roger Henderson joins me now. He's the news director for WBOB Radio in Jacksonville. So, Roger, break this down for me and tell me a little bit more about the kind of person that perpetrator is and the kind of crime that was exacted on that officer.
Well, he seems like a very emotionally unstable person, Ashley, and in addition to that, was walking around with a gun while emotionally unstable. Reports are he'd gotten into some type of argument with his girlfriend, stormed out of the house, got in his car, started driving erratically, was pulled over by the police officer because he was a danger on the roads, and then, 19 years old, pulls out a gun, thinks it would be a good idea to open fire on this police officer, and tragically...
And not just once. He fired a number of times, and if that officer had not been, thank God, even though off duty, wearing a ballistics vest, he may not be with us today.
Yes, and despite the fact that he did have a ballistic vest on, I remember when the sheriff department did a press conference, they pleaded for the community to pray for the officer because the injuries were severe. And I don't believe at that time they were even expecting him to survive. But
so he did survive.
He did make it. Yes,
and he took, as I understand it, 3 bullets to the head, to the stomach, to the hand. I mean, it's amazing that he survived that. A bullet to the head alone. How did he survive this, and how badly was he injured?
Well, the injuries were severe. The press conference at the time, the sheriff's office said that he has a very long and difficult recovery ahead of him. I actually was surprised that the officer is back on duty, that he was able to recover that quickly, to at least to do some type of desk work, I'm sure.
Okay, so now that we've laid out the facts of what happened out on that very frightening moment on the road, let's get to that moment in the courtroom, because you could understand how a victim who had been shot at several times, nearly lost his life, would be so angry looking at that smug little face. Can we roll the tape of Kevin Rojas walking into the courtroom? 19 at the time and all of 21 now, sure seems to think he's got the world, by the tail, doesn't he? All jumpsuited up and hands in handcuffs and legs in the leg irons. And yet that kind of a look, smiling as though, I got this. This is an easy one. So you could imagine how the police officer, Roger, felt looking at this kid walk in, a kid who had tried to kill him and nearly did.
Yeah, and obviously very upset. But to be completely objective, to bring lube with you to court, this was not something that was a spur-of-the-moment type of idea he came up with. He obviously planned this and was, probably walking around with a lot of bitterness and hatred for the guy, understandably so, to be able to have the lube in his hand to slam it down at the desk at sentencing.
Okay, so let me give some background here. When we played that moment just a few minutes ago, you couldn't see the officer and you couldn't see that moment that the bottle gets hit down on the courtroom table, and there's a good reason for it. This is an undercover officer. And so the request is made and honored that he wasn't shown during this sentencing. He wasn't shown during this moment in court. I do want to play that again for you, because now that you know the full extent of what happened to the officer, I want you to re-listen to how he reacted to this smirk in court.
So I got a little gift for you. You're going to need a lot of this where you're going.
To be clear, Roger, where is he going and for how long?
Well, the gentleman Rojas was sentenced to life in prison, the maximum sentence. When it comes to gun crimes in Florida, very, very harsh penalties are imposed when someone shoots a weapon, even if they miss. It's a 20-year sentence. So hitting the officer several times, obviously we knew this guy Rojas was going to be sentenced to jail for a very long time.
Yeah, let me read a letter that the mayor actually ended up receiving after this moment went public, and the mayor's name is Lenny Curry. The person who wrote the letter is anonymous, but identifies as a man from Boston, and this is what this person said to the mayor. I and several other national anti-sexual assault advocacy groups plan on beginning a national boycott of Jacksonville, the city that advocates rape of prisoners and lets officers to be held, these are his words, at a different standard. I want to bring in Sheriff Richard Jones from the Butler County Sheriff's Office, and I also want to bring in at the same time retired FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon, to get the law enforcement perspective on all of this. Gentlemen, thank you so much. You know, first to you, if I can, Sheriff, give me your feelings about what you saw transpire in court, now with the full perspective of what our audience knows to have happened to that officer and that he nearly lost his life and saw that smirk in the courtroom.
I personally viewed the tape. I've seen it. I've seen the whole thing. Maybe the guy has dry skin. Maybe he needs lube for dry skin. I've worked in the prison system. People are so fed up with these punks that come in and shoot police officers. The police officer was the victim here. Where's the outcry? He gets to make a statement to this punk that's in the courtroom that is going to be in prison the rest of his life. And he doesn't have to have love for this guy. I don't have any love for him. He's not advocating rape. He's not advocating that this guy have a good time in prison. If this guy worked for me, this police officer, I would just tell him, hey, probably not a good thing to do. But hey, I've got to find a job. You got to work. You got to live with this the rest of your life. And don't have to wish this guy to do well in prison. Hey, I understand, and I'm fine with it. He's not advocating rape. He's not advocating. He's just said, here's some lube, and he's not saying, go get raped.
So, Bobby Chacon, I think we've all been inside enough courtrooms to know that when a victim is given his or her moment, much worse has been said. I mean, I have heard people ask for the perp to burn in hell, eternal agony.
Absolutely.
I hope you die at the hands of another inmate. If you think about it, this officer is a victim. He's a human being. He nearly lost his life. But you feel slightly different.
Well, I mean, I agree with the sheriff, and I agree with you that this was a victim speaking, the victim impact statement. I mean, he wasn't speaking as an officer per se, and so I think it's ridiculous to say that the police officer or the city of Jacksonville at large, endorses prison rape or anything like that. I think that this was and I also agree with the sheriff that it appears that his own sheriff gave him a talking to about courtroom demeanor and things like this. You probably, in some ways, wish he might not have said it, but I think it's an unconscionable overreaction to say that this is an endorsement of prison rape. I mean, this is a victim looking in the eye of the person that shot him in the head. I hope none of us ever have to look in the eye of the person who shot us in the head. So I think that this victim was given a little latitude, and I think the reactions here are absolutely ridiculous. I think that you hope that you don't make that thing, but in an emotional moment like that, I think this officer or this victim is perfectly it's perfectly okay to give him that emotional message to that person that shot him in the head and fired a deadly weapon at his son. So there's something to be said about the sheriff has to kind of counsel his people on this kind of thing, and I think that's the end of it. There absolutely should be no repercussions beyond the letter that the sheriff issued that said he had a talk with the officer and things like that. I think this is a huge overreaction.
I have the statement from the sheriff. The sheriff of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department actually put out his reaction to this as well. This is one of his guys, and he said this: "We have discussed proper courtroom demeanor and professionalism with the officer. I'm grateful for the outcome of the incident and that I'm able to have a conversation with my officer," which means AKA he is alive. He goes on to say, The officer continues to deal with the incident that could have taken both his life and that of his young son, as he will for the rest of his life. So I'm upping the ante here, gentlemen. Little known fact, that officer who did what he did in that courtroom, slamming the bottle of lube and taunting that perp, his kid was in the back of his car. He was off duty and he was driving his boy to school. And when those bullets came flying through the window, they flew right past that child. And thank Jesus that kid was not hit. So I want to bring that sort of full circle at this point. And Sheriff Jones, do you think that changes the metric on how they will deal with this officer, how they will speak to that officer, whether this guy's letter to the mayor about a boycott is going to have much of an impact? We're now dealing with a father who was shot multiple times, and by the grace of God, the kid in the back seat wasn't. Does that change everything?
No, this is an overreaction. As the gentleman on before me said, it's an overreaction. The police officer, it's still America. The police officer has a right to address the jury, and he's doing it not as a police officer, but as a victim. And he is allowed not to wish this person well in prison. He's allowed to do that. And as far as the lube goes, probably not a great idea, but I understand. He's not advocating rape. He just said, hey, you're going to need this lube in prison and in jail. And, hey, things happen. I worked in the prison system. I supervise over 500 people here in Ohio. We have a jail. We don't advocate rape, but I fully understand what the officer done, and the officer would not get in any trouble at my place or in any other place that I'm aware of. And people, they should be outraged that this person come in and shot this police officer and tried to kill him and has no remorse whatsoever. And so he stood up and he said, you're going to need this lubricant. So what?
I can certainly see both sides of the argument, but I'll tell you what, if that was my kid in the back of the car and someone were shooting at me with no regard for my little guy, I don't know what I would have said or done, but someone would have had to hold me back. I want to thank all my guests, Roger Henderson, and yeah, go ahead.
And maybe just had dry skin. Who knows?
Well, I do appreciate all your perspectives. Sheriff Jones and Bobby Chacon, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. A Connecticut man